Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark made it clear how much he prioritizes basketball in conference realignment negotiations. What does that mean for Gonzaga's immediate future? Let's discuss.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome to the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Well, we got some Summer League Zags to discuss today, including a reported new deal for Filip Petrusev and the Philadelphia 76ers, some dominance from Chet Holmgren, a great game from Julian Strawther as well. But first, we're going to get back to everybody's favorite off-season topic, a topic we haven't explored a lot recently on the Locked On Zags podcast. That is conference realignment, specifically Big 12 conference realignment, because the Big 12 media days happened over this past week. Of course, most of the conversation was about the teams that have already been added to the Big 12 conference in BYU and Cincinnati and UCF and Houston, and what that's going to look like for them, the exits of Texas and Oklahoma, et cetera, et cetera. But Commissioner Brett Yormark was asked a few questions about ongoing realignment. Of course, the Pac-12 does not have their media rights deal yet, something that has been ongoing for almost a year, a little bit over a year, really, since USC and UCLA made their announcements that they're going to the Big Ten. So there's a lot of kind of standstill in the conference realignment conversation. Of course, the biggest news recently was San Diego State allegedly not leaving the Mountain West and then being told they did leave the Mountain West. And there's a little bit of confusion on what's going on there, whether they're going to join the Pac-12 or not. But the Gonzaga conversation has really kind of dimmed a little bit. And there was a great article by Pat Forty at Sports Illustrated. He's covered a lot of the conference realignment conversations throughout the last year. Him and Dennis Dodd at CBS are really good resources for specifically Big 12 realignment conversations. And this article kind of talked a lot about what is going on with the Big 12 right now, some of the stuff that they are working on. And it feels like there is a big push towards the East Coast. Brett Yormark has made it very clear that he wants to be a coast-to-coast conference. That is a big part of his push. He wants teams in all four time zones. There is a tremendous appeal from a media rights perspective of having viewership in different time zones. There's a lot of appeal in this. Obviously, the travel is a big component of that, and part of the thing that has hung up Gonzaga in the past, and part of the thing that's hanging up UConn potentially as a target for the Big 12 as well. But right now, one of the things that's coming up for the Big 12 is they're hosting a basketball event at Rucker Park, the Rucker Park, one of the most iconic basketball venues in all of America, in the world, quite frankly, in New York, New York. And it kind of feels like maybe more of a push towards UConn, St. John's, even Syracuse could potentially be in that conversation. It does feel like the Big 12 is really trying to grasp into the New York market, which is very understandable if you think that you have a chance of pulling a team out of that market like St. John's, like Syracuse, which is not in downtown. It's not in Manhattan. Obviously, it's on the other side of the state, but still a New York brand. UConn, obviously, in Stores, Connecticut, but still in the that general region. Here's a couple quotes from Brett Yormark that I wanted to kind of discuss and kind of figure out where we think what this might mean for Gonzaga. He said, quote, "I'm bullish on basketball. Everyone looks at it through the singular lens of what it means for the media deal. I look at it that way too, but I also look at what basketball can do to create value in other parts of our enterprise. It's tough to take a college football games down to Mexico, but basketball can be the catalyst to international expansion." I like this. I like the way he's thinking here. He has already made a push to do some stuff in Mexico. Big 12 Mexico is something that exists. It's something that he's pushing. They want to bring games down there. They're planning to bring football games and basketball games down there in the next couple of years. And for him to acknowledge, like, yeah, basketball is an easier sport to travel in that way could be an indication that they want to continue to grab premier basketball brands. My impression is that Gonzaga is no longer the top basketball brand they are pursuing, because it appears that they are pretty heavily pursuing UConn. Of course, UConn, the defending national champions, a program that has been a bit unsteady in where they've been from a conference perspective. They were, of course, in the Big East for a very, very long time. And then when the Big East kind of fell apart about a decade ago, they ended up in the AAC for a while, have now jumped back into the Big East, of course, and look like they're going to stay there for the long haul. Of course, the Big East is fantastic right now. It's really strong in basketball. Marquette was excellent last year. Xavier was solid last year. UConn, of course, won the national championship last year. Villanova was down, but they'll be back. St. John's hires Rick Pitino. Georgetown hires Ed Cooley, which is a huge boost for them. Providence loses Ed Cooley, but hires Kim English. Like, I think the conference is in really good shape, but UConn has a football program. Not a particularly good one, but they have a football program. The Big East does not sponsor football. The Big 12 would happily take UConn's crappy football team if they could add that premier basketball brand. Another quote from Yormark specifically addressing conference realignment. He says, it's kind of a non-quote quote, as many executives aren't prone to do. He says, "We have a plan for expansion. I'm not going to really address it today. Hopefully we can execute it sooner than later. If we stay at 12, we're perfectly fine with that. If within the value equation, there's alignment to add members, Power 5 or non-Power 5, we'll look to pursue it." Pat Forty here listed St. John's as the kind of top option, he thinks, because they have huge booster numbers, huge sponsorship numbers. The Vitamin Water CEO, Mike Rapole, is a huge donor for St. John's, and that's a lot of cash flow coming in. Of course, they just hired Rick Pitino, so the expectation is that that program is probably going to be a basketball powerhouse in the coming years. Of course, how the longevity there remains to be seen. Rick Pitino is not young by any stretch of the imagination, but in the heart of New York, being able to add a program like that while they're on the up and ups would be huge. Again, he does list Gonzaga in passing, Pat Forty does in this article, but not a lot of depth there. And I think it's important to remember some other quotes we've heard in the past, specifically from Gonzaga president Thane McCullough and from Gonzaga athletic director Chris Standiford, where basically they said, we are not in a hurry. We are not desperate. We are not going to make a move for the sake of making a move, and we are not unhappy in the WCC. I'm paraphrasing these quotes, of course, but that was effectively the messaging that was communicated. We are exploring other options. They have hired a firm, an outside firm, to look into specifically what it would take for them to get into a power conference. So it is not they are uninterested in making that kind of move. It is that they are not desperate. There is a key difference there. Gonzaga is not unhappy in the WCC, but they would be silly to not explore options to get into the Power 5. I mean, it would be ludicrous to just pass on even looking at those options. They may look at them, they may determine they don't want them because the revenue split doesn't line up with what they want. It's not a big enough financial gain to offset the amount of travel they would have to do, the challenges they would face with other sports. Like there's a lot of factors that we have discussed many times on this podcast that have been discussed many other places as well. But it doesn't mean that Gonzaga is out of the running here necessarily. It just means that it looks like the Big 12 is maybe focusing still on potentially adding some of those corner schools from the Pac-12 like Colorado, Arizona State, Utah. It sounds like that's less likely to happen. I think if that was going to happen, it would have happened by now. We've seen these occasionally. We'll see a report that like Colorado's on the verge of leaving, and then somebody from Colorado says, that's not true. And then nothing happens. That's been basically the pattern we've been in for 9 to 10 months now. So I don't think anything is imminent for Pac-12 realignment, for Big 12 realignment. And I think if anything were to happen, it would probably be with one of those East Coast teams. What does that mean for Gonzaga? Not necessarily anything. Honestly, it doesn't really mean anything. I don't think, again, Gonzaga is not going to say, well, the Big 12 is not interested in us this year, so we're going to make a rash decision and jump into the Pac-12 or jump into the Big East. They're not going to do that. They're just going to stand pat. And I know that that's the boring answer. That's the not as exciting answer. I know a lot of people are really hoping Gonzaga can get out of the WCC. Obviously, the Big 12 would be better basketball competition. It'd be better brand recognition. They would probably be able to get better recruits. Like, there's a lot of benefits. Do not get me wrong. There's a lot of benefits to being in the Big 12 or the Big East or even the Pac-12. But there's nothing really wrong with being in the WCC. It's not hurting them. They made 8 straight Sweet 16s. Like, they've been a number 1 seed multiple times. Yes, they haven't won the national championship, but nobody in the Pac-12 done that since 1997. Nobody in the Big 10 has done that since 2001. Like, Just because they haven't won a championship doesn't mean the WCC is the single fault there. I have advocated that the WCC is not holding Gonzaga back, but that doesn't mean that there aren't better options out there. They just don't have to make a move. And based on what we're hearing from the Big 12, it doesn't sound like a move is coming anytime soon. So for those of you and holding your breath for conference realignment, I would suggest exhaling, because I think if anything's going to happen, it is at minimum a year away from them even being an announcement, and probably multiple years away from any actual changes happening. Well, Chet Holmgren posted another excellent game in the Summer League with the Oklahoma City Thunder. Julian Strawther had his best professional performance for the Denver Nuggets. We're going to talk about all that and more after a word from today's sponsor, FanDuel. Baseball season is in full swing, and there is no better place to get in on the MLB action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet does not win. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to join today. Zag fans, perhaps you want to make a bet regarding Marco Gonzalez and the Seattle Mariners, or Eli Morgan and the Cleveland Guardians, or of course, recent call-up Alec Jacob for the San Diego Padres. Either way, don't miss your chance to snag a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, an official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, folks, want to thank all of you for making Locked On Zags your first listen or your first watch of the day. Shout out to those of you on YouTube, and shout out to those everyday listeners who make Locked On Zags a part of your daily routine. It is very, very much appreciated. We got conversation about the women's basketball program on Friday's show, as well as a look at a potential transfer addition the Zags could make. And of course, we'll continue to keep you updated on the end of Summer League next week, and more on what Gonzaga could do with those final roster spots as we get into the middle of the summer. But for right now, I want to give you an update on the last few days of NBA Summer League. We talked about Summer League on Tuesday, Tuesday's episode of Locked On Zags. So we're going to talk about what has happened since then in the last couple of days, some big updates, some big performances, what it might mean for these guys going forward. And we're going to start with the big fella, Chet Holmgren, potential 2023-24 NBA Rookie of the Year candidate. He'll have some competition from Victor Wembanyama, of course, of the San Antonio Spurs, Scoot Henderson of the Portland Trail Blazers. We'll see if Brandon Miller from the Hornets can get in that conversation. Amen and Asar Thompson, the Thompson twins with Houston and Detroit as well. But Chet is going to be in that conversation, even as a non-traditional rookie, because he did not play last season. His most recent game with Oklahoma City, likely his last game in the Summer League. They've been kind of alternating him every other game for good reason. There's not really a compelling reason to overplay him in Summer League, coming off of a pretty serious foot injury and knowing that he's really good and he's going to impact our team next year. So he doesn't need to try out. He's not fighting for a spot. And if he was fighting for a spot, he had earned it on his performance on July 12th, 25 points on 9 of 15 shooting. That is just tremendous. It's what we know Chet Holmgren is capable of doing. 9 of 15 shooting, 7 of 8 from the free throw line. He also tacked on 9 boards and 5 blocks, along with 2 assists and 1 steal. A stat-stuffing performance from Chet Holmgren there. The 5 blocks, obviously, remarkable stuff from him. You watch the highlight package from this game. One of them was a guy who drove to the basket, and I remember seeing this so much from Chet in his 1 year at Gonzaga, and I'm excited to see it more in the NBA because it's surprising. Bigger guys will drive into him. They'll maybe put a spin move on him, or they'll back him down, and they'll physically move him. He's not sturdy. He's a skinny guy. That's been a well-documented fact about Chet Holmgren. And so you'll see defenders appear to gain a bunch of ground on him. They'll push him, they'll move him, they'll back him towards the basket, and they feel confident that I'm able to move this guy easily. I'll get a good look. And it looks bad on TV. It looks like Chet's getting pushed around, and then they go up for a shot and Chet swats it back in their face. It happened countless times at Gonzaga, and it happened at least once in this most recent game for Oklahoma City. I think it probably happened more than once, but I definitely saw one highlight where a guy did a spin move, got a bunch of leverage and position on him, and Chet still put that thing right back in his face. He had a great chase down block off the backboard. Just incredible stuff from Chet Holmgren. He's moving like somebody who does not have any lingering effects from this injury. He said as much in a quote recently after a game. He's going to have a tremendous rookie season. I'm really, really excited to see what Chet Holmgren looks like in a full-time NBA position, because I think he's going to be great this year. Julian Strawther had the best performance of his summer league career. He still hasn't been particularly efficient as a shooter, but in the last game that he played for the Denver Nuggets on the 12th, he had 21 points and 3 rebounds. He was 7 of 17 from the field, which is okay. He was 3 of 11 from deep, which is not great. I'm glad that he's getting an opportunity. Like, I'm glad he's getting the opportunity to take so many shots and be an integral part of their summer league offense. It makes sense. They want to figure out, who is this guy? What does he bring to our table? What is he, is he ready to compete in year one type of deal? And we saw him have a really nice block shot in one of his most recent games, stuff somebody straight at the rim, not something he does all that often. In fact, Theo Lawson of the Spokesman Review tweeted this, that he was talking to Julian's sister, and she said that she was glad to see him playing defense, which made me chuckle. And obviously showing defensive instincts in the NBA, showing that he can protect the rim and play good defense, like that is really valuable, because right now Julian Strawther projects as a 3-and-D wing, a role player, a rotation guy who plays, maybe not a full-time starter, all-star type, but a guy who plays consistent minutes every single night and helps you win by playing good defense and knocking down open 3-point shots. That is who Julian Strawther projects to be in the NBA. That is his size, his frame, his format, all of that. But you got to have the defense. You got to prove it on that end of the floor. If Julian's starting to do that, even in summer league, that's a huge, huge benefit for him going forward. Drew Timme has played one game since we last talked about him. And our last conversation about Drew Timme was frustration on our part of how little the Milwaukee Bucks have given him an opportunity to play so far in summer league. And that frustration continues, because Drew Timme played one game since we last spoke on July 11th. He played 2 minutes and 26 seconds. He got one opportunity to score, put a guy in a spin cycle, laid it off the glass, 2 points, 101 shooting. That's it. That's all we got from Drew Timme. It's frustrating. It's frustrating. I want to see Drew get more of an opportunity. I don't care to see Taco Fall continue to get opportunities. We know who Taco Fall is. He's been the same guy for like 4 years. Give Drew Timme an opportunity. This guy scored 2,200 points in college. He was an All-American. And you put him on your team and don't even give him a chance to prove what he's capable of doing in the summer league? If they think they already know who he is, then why do they sign him? I don't understand it. Give him more of a look. Give him more of a run. They're pretty much out of time now, so he's going to have to prove it in training camp, going to have to prove it in the G League next year. Hopefully gets an opportunity to absolutely crush it in the G League, and somebody will sign him to a 10-day or even a 2-way contract, or frankly, he might perform well enough to actually get himself an NBA contract. We know he's capable of being an NBA player. They've never pretended he's going to be the same caliber player in the NBA as he is in college. Never pretended that. But the thought that he can't even get on the floor in summer league is upsetting to me. I know he's good enough to do that, and it's frustrating that he's not getting those opportunities. Next up, a couple more guys to talk about here from Gonzaga. Joel Ayayi's played 2 games with the Memphis Grizzlies since we last spoke. On July 10th, he had 3 points, 1 of 1 from 3. He also had a rebound. That was in 10 minutes, so he only got 1 shot attempt. And then in his next game on July 12th, he played about 10 minutes as well and did not get any shot attempts. 0 points, 2 boards, 1 assist, and a pair of fouls. Joel doesn't look like a guy who's going to get himself a 2-way contract or an Exhibit 10 deal. I think he's going to end up being a regular G League player next year, maybe in Memphis with the hustle. If they keep him around, maybe he'll end up somewhere else. Doesn't mean he couldn't find his way into the NBA at some point during the season, but I'd be surprised at this point if he landed an actual contract before the season starts. Next up, Andrew Nembhard. Andrew Nembhard is done in the summer league, but his last performance was an excellent one on July 10th. 21 points, 7 assists, 3 steals, 3 boards, 2 turnovers, 8 of 16 from the field, 2 of 5 from 3. The reports coming out after Andrew Nembhard's game were the same ones that we see a handful of times for second-year players in the summer league, which is, yeah, he's too good to be here. We're done. We don't need him to be here anymore. He's proven it. A guy who started 63 games last year. It's rare for them to even be in the summer league at all, but second-round picks from the previous year tend to end up in summer league. So Nembhard ends up on the summer league roster, even though he kind of proved he doesn't need to try out for his spot, and his performances so far in the summer league have indicated, yeah, we're good. We don't need him to end up showing us anymore. Still very curious what Nembhard's role is going to look like at the next level. I think he's kind of locked into the backup point guard role behind Tyrese Halliburton, behind Bruce Brown and Ben Mathurin for the Pacers. There are some rumors that the Pacers are looking to trade for Pascal Siakam from the Toronto Raptors. Andrew Nembhard is a good young piece. He's from Canada. I'm just saying it might make some sense for him to be included in a return to Toronto. Would be fun to see what he could do in his home country with the Raptors. And then finally, Malachi Smith. Unfortunately, I don't have an update for you on Malachi Smith because he has not played in the Summer League. Every single game that the Blazers have played, he has been listed as a DNP-CD, which is did not play coach's decision. There's no report of an injury. It just doesn't seem like he is getting onto the floor. Hopefully Portland keeps him around with their G League affiliate, the Rip City Remix. I say that hopefully because selfishly I want to be able to go and watch him play next year for the Rip City Remix. It sounds like that's the likely situation for him, but Portland never really got him a chance, never really gave him a chance to prove what he could do in the Summer League. Well, the only Zag we did not talk about who participated in the Summer League is Filip Petrusev, and that is because it is confirmed by Filip Petrusev's head coach, Nick Nurse, that he will be a member of the Philadelphia 76ers next season. A huge congrats to him. We'll talk about how this happened, what it means for him right after this. All right, folks, segment 3 here. Still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags. And we're still talking Summer League for the Gonzaga Bulldogs. We talked about the 6 players who's been participating over the last couple of days and what that production has looked like. The 7th guy is Filip Petrusev. We'll talk about what he's done in the Summer League, but more importantly, Nick Nurse, the head coach of the Philadelphia 76ers, replacing Doc Rivers, went on Tyrese Maxey's podcast. Tyrese Maxey is one of the starting guards for Philadelphia. Nurse went on the podcast and talked about the offseason, a whole bunch of stuff. And one of the things he revealed in that podcast was that Filip Petrusev was going to make the roster. And I'll read the direct quote here. Nick Nurse here said, "We're getting our young guys lots of minutes, and some of these guys, Filip, who's going to be on the roster this year, but we're also tactically trying to build." Again, can't say it a whole lot more clearly than that. Filip, who is going to be on the roster this year. And look, this isn't the first time we've heard that this was likely to happen. Filip Petrusev's agent over the summer, or earlier in the summer, I should say, basically said he's coming to America. He's going to play for the 76ers in the Summer League, and he's planning to be on the roster. That is the goal. That is the plan. He is not going to re-sign in Europe until it is basically confirmed that he's not going to make the NBA roster. I'm paraphrasing again, but that's more or less what Filip Petrusev's agent said is, we expect that this is the time that we are an NBA player. We expect now to be the time that we make it. And it sounds like that's the case. It sounds like Filip Petrusev is in the cards, in the plans for the 76ers next season, a team that is unclear whether they're going to rebuild. They still have Joel Embiid. They still technically have James Harden. He did not opt out of his contract. He opted back into his contract and then demanded a trade. He might get traded, but also Philadelphia doesn't have to trade him. They don't have to do that. And a core of Maxey, Harden, and Embiid is pretty darn good, along with Tobias Harris. Like, this is a team that could be legitimately contending if they find a way to trade Harden, get some assets back. Maybe they'll go more into a rebuild mode. That could open up some more playing time for Petrusev. A quote from Filip that was quoted at the Spokesman Review by the great Theo Lawson as well. He says, "I'm just feeling more confident. I know what to expect, and I came more prepared compared to last year and the year before. I was not in as good a shape as I am right now. I think it's noticeable, and that's why I think I'm doing better this year." And it's true. Petrusev looks better. He's more fluid. He's moving smoother. His decision-making is quicker. His processing seems better. Like, he just looks more comfortable playing NBA-style basketball. Now, Summer League is not quite NBA-style basketball, but if you can do well there, I think there's plenty of optimism that he could be a productive part of Philadelphia's bench. He averaged 10.4 points and 6.2 rebounds so far in the Summer League. Not sure if he's going to end up playing anymore or not. And he's had a productive European career as well. He spent last year in Russia, 24 games. His team went 21-3 in those 24 games. He averaged 11-5. The year before that, he was in Turkey, averaging 15-6. The year before that, he was an MVP in Serbia, his home country. That was after he left Gonzaga after his sophomore year, went back to Serbia, won the MVP award by averaging 23.6 points, 7.6 boards, and 3.8 assists. And I kind of like, that we're seeing another Zag take a non-traditional path to the NBA. Kevin Pangos did this recently, 7 years after his college career ended. He finally got a chance in the NBA. It was a short-lived opportunity for him, but still very cool that he got to realize that dream and got to live it. And now we see Petrusev leave Gonzaga early, go overseas, and then come back to the United States. He, of course, got drafted by Philadelphia back in 2021, so they have held the rights to him as an American, as an NBA player for the last couple of years. That finally they're going to exercise those rights and get him a chance to play this year. But Petrusev leaving early opened the door for Drew Timme to become Drew Timme. It also opened the door for him for Petrusev to explore other parts of his game, some of the outside shooting stuff, and it still resulted in him being an NBA player. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody involved. As for what his role is going to look like next year, again, it kind of depends what the 76ers do with James Harden. Right now, they kind of have a pretty stacked front court, so I'm not super confident that Petrusev is going to be a rotation guy or a consistent player for this team. Of course, depends on if they make any trades or anything like that. But they have Joel Embiid, they have PJ Tucker, they have Paul Reed, they have Daniel House, they have Mo Bamba, and they have Montrezl Harrell. All those guys are centers or power forwards. All of them are NBA veterans. All of those are guys who are probably going to need to play. Now, if Philadelphia is committed to seeing what their young guys have, they'll give Petrusev chances over guys like Harrell. And probably not Tucker because he's better, but even Bamba, potentially, they might give him some looks over those guys. But it kind of depends. If Philadelphia's trying to win next year, they're going to play the guys who have more NBA experience. So I'm not confident that Petrusev is going to play a ton of minutes next year. But again, Nick Nurse isn't going to hop on a podcast and say, hey, this guy's going to make the roster if that guy's not going to make the roster. So this is a really good sign for Petrusev's NBA future, and we should get a chance to see him make his NBA debut at some point this season. All right, that is going to wrap it up for us today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. We got more fun stuff coming away on Friday. Got a transfer to talk about that is available in the portal. Got some women's basketball conversation for you as well to close out the week right here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Available wherever you get your podcast. It is also available on YouTube as well. Go hit that big red subscribe button if you have not done so yet. It is very much appreciated. Thank you all for listening. And until next time, as always, go Zags.